All right, let's get right into it. Today we're doing a complete overview of a highly automated camper van systems. And look, we're not just talking about slapping a couple of smart bulbs into a ceiling here. This explainer is a deep dive into a literal masterclass in home automation architecture, completely compressed into the footprint of a vehicle. We're going to explore how hundreds of lines of configuration and automation scripts work together, taking raw code and transforming a simple van into what is essentially a living, breathing, self-sustaining off-grid organism. It practically takes care of itself.
To pull this off, the sheer scale of the system's nervous system is incredibly precise. When you look at the underlying configuration code, every major organ of this van is statically assigned and mapped out. We're talking the Victron Serbo GX power monitor, the afterburner climate control, all the way down to the security cameras. This foundation is absolutely crucial, because when the van needs to execute a critical survival protocol, it has to know exactly where every single piece of hardware lives on the internal network.
So to really understand this setup, we'll be breaking this down into 5 core areas: the digital brain and nervous system, power and battery management, climate and air quality, intelligent water systems, and finally, the cockpit and AI integration. Starting with Section 1, the digital brain and nervous system. Let's look at how this van actually thinks and communicates.
It's actually pretty wild to see that the main server relies on a literal digital heartbeat to stay alive. The code includes a Victron MQTT Keep Alive automation that publishes an empty payload every 30 seconds. If that heartbeat stops beating, the brain loses connection to its power center. It's a beautifully simple, elegant failsafe that ensures continuous communication across the entire internal network.
And this perfectly illustrates how a simple digital toggle coordinates with heavy-duty components. The van uses master flags for things like the room, water, and bath, so flipping a digital switch automatically triggers the physical KC868 relays. But, and this is smart, what happens if you actually need to work on the van? Well, they've coded a dedicated service mode. When activated, it forces all these system flags off, and it's intentionally rate-limited to a 5-second delay. That little delay prevents a massive storm of network commands from causing complete hardware chaos during maintenance.
Moving on to Section 2, power and battery management, essentially the heart and metabolism of the whole operation.
Talk about bulletproof design. The van relies on a mutual failover logic for its power data. It constantly reads battery stats from both the overarching Victron system and directly from the Fogstar battery itself. Now, if either of those sources drops out and reports unavailable for just 60 seconds, the system automatically pivots. It seamlessly switches over to rely on the surviving data source. The occupants never even notice a hiccup, and the van never loses track of its power state. Just incredibly clever engineering. And let's see how that builds into an active defense mechanism. This step-by-step eco-mode automation is pure survival instinct. The exact moment the battery state of charge dips below 25%, the van activates eco-mode. First, it announces the emergency out loud via its voice satellite, and then it immediately initiates massive load shedding. It aggressively kills the immersion heater, the underfloor heating, device chargers, and even the water fill valve. It effectively throws itself into a digital coma to protect those battery cells, and it won't wake back up to normal function until the charge climbs back above 30%.
Battery charging is just as meticulously managed. The van dynamically toggles between fast and slow charging relays depending on need, but it strictly enforces a 98% safety shutoff to prevent any risk of overcharging. On top of that, there's an inverter auto timeout. If the inverter is drawing less than 35 volt amps for 2 solid minutes, the van just assumes someone left it on by accident and automatically shuts it down.
Let's move into Section 3, climate and air quality. Think of this as the van's lungs and skin. We all know that in a small, enclosed space, air quality can degrade really rapidly. Well, this van constantly monitors the air. If carbon dioxide spikes above 1200 or volatile organic compounds hit 500, the system takes immediate action. It forces the floor fan on to circulate fresh air, it makes a vocal announcement about the poor air quality, and it even sends push notifications directly to the owners, Paul and Sharon, on their Pixel phones. And it absolutely refuses to reset until that CO2 drops back down to a safe, comfortable 1000.
The main heat source, the afterburner diesel heater, doesn't just run blind on a simple thermostat either. It's constrained by some very strict rules. For example, it has a cooling interlock. This means if the heater is running its mechanical cooldown cycle, the software physically prevents you from turning the heating flags back on, completely protecting the hardware from damage. It also has an automated frost mode to keep the van at a safe 5 degrees Celsius so pipes don't burst. It even cross-references motion sensors, meaning the underfloor heating will only trigger at 8 a.m., if the battery's healthy and the system senses someone is actually out of bed and walking around.
And there's that biological redundancy again, this time in the climate sensors. If the primary room humidity sensor dies or just drops offline, the van doesn't crash its climate scripts. Nope, it instantly falls back to a secondary Zigbee sensor to feed the necessary data to the system. It keeps everything running perfectly smooth, without the occupants having to lift a finger.
Section 4 brings us to the intelligent water systems. This is all about metabolic heat and safety.
This part is honestly brilliant. The van essentially uses its water tank as a massive thermal battery. The system evaluates the overall power situation on a 5-minute heartbeat. If the leisure solar setup is pulling in over 250 watts and the main battery is already sitting above an 85% charge, the van basically says, hey, I have free energy and nowhere to put it, so it dynamically dumps that excess solar power directly into the immersion heater. During peak times, like between noon and 3 p.m., it actually deliberately raises the maximum water temperature by 10 degrees just to soak up that free solar yield.
But, hot, pressurized water can be super dangerous, so the safety stakes are high here. The van enforces a strict 2-minute and 5-second timeout on the fill valve. If it's left open past that, the van automatically shuts it off to prevent flooding. And if the water temperature ever exceeds 61 degrees Celsius for just 1 minute, it triggers an instant global shutoff, killing both the immersion heater and the diesel master heater. They did include a manual override, though, specifically a Legionella protocol, to safely bypass these cutoffs so they can pasteurize the tank and kill any bacteria.
Finally, we reach Section 5, the cockpit and AI integration, the intelligent observer.
Interacting with all of this happens through a custom cockpit dashboard, and the UI is entirely contextual. It uses dynamic status colors, flashing blue for cold water, and scaling all the way up to red for hot. But the really smart part is the conditional warning cards. Giant red tiles warning about poor air quality or fridge temperature high are completely hidden during normal operation. The dashboard only shows you what you absolutely need to know, exactly when you need to know it. And interacting with this van isn't limited to touch. It features a voice satellite system that announces major state changes out loud. But the van even has manners. It manages its own volume based on the time of day, automatically muting its announcements at 10 p.m. so it doesn't wake anyone up, and then resetting itself to a gentle 70% volume at 7:30 in the morning.
Okay, get ready for the ultimate Easter egg of the entire system. Every single night at precisely 8 p.m., the van compiles its daily data logs. It gathers up the water temperatures, the solar production stats, and the battery drain history. It then packages all of these statistics up and feeds them directly into Google's Gemini AI, automatically prompting it to act as an expert off-grid power analyst.
The AI literally acts as a daily auditor. It reviews the van's logic against reality. It checks if that 200-watt solar minimum actually correlated with the immersion heater firing properly. And it double-checks if the battery state of charge was negatively impacted. Then, the AI writes up a customized performance review and sends it directly to the system's notification panel, telling the owners exactly how efficiently their van ran that day.
Which leaves us with a truly fascinating question to ponder as we wrap up this explainer. When your home actively monitors its own heartbeat, intelligently dumps excess solar power into a thermal battery, forces you to breathe clean air, and audits its own performance every single night with AI, who is really taking care of who? Are you maintaining the van, or is the van maintaining you? Thanks for joining me on this deep dive into the ultimate automated camper van. Catch you next time.